And we're back with another episode of Viewpoint Talking Point Memo. So, you all know that our budget was yesterday, and I wanted to get in and give my perspective on what transpired with regards to the budget 2020 to 2021. Because as you all know, the opposition leader is going to be giving her perspective on Friday. And I wanted to give my perspective just before she jumps in, because by that time, she gives her perspective on Friday, then my podcast comes out on Monday. I think by that time you guys will have gotten tired of budget analysis and all the points is going to be stale and all of that. So I think it's best that I jump in now and give my analysis and have you give your opinion on what you think about it. So the Minister of Finance was back with another budget presentation for the year 2020 into 2021. No, it was a long budget. It was a boring budget. It was 3 hours, if not longer than 3 hours, and it probably felt like a lifetime. But as with these typical budgets, the first 2.5 hours was just a bunch of fancy talk and repetition from previous budget, what they like to call copy and paste. And when you all boil it down, the last half an hour was basically what we all were waiting to hear, the numbers, just straight to the point numbers, and that just came in the last half hour. So if you were unlucky like me, you listened to the entire 3 hours. If you were smart, you just listened to the half hour, and you probably would have gotten the same amount of information that I would have gotten from listening to that 3 hours of. Oh my god, it was just long. That's the main thing about it. It was long. So when I listened to the entire presentation, um, basically what he's saying is that in terms of total expenditure, he's expecting to spend $49.5 billion, but the revenue he's expecting to raise is $41.3 billion. No, this is based on oil prices of $45 per barrel and gas price of $3 per MMBTU, which basically gives you a deficit that he's planning to run to the tune of about 8.2 billion. Now, I was actually hoping for a smaller deficit, somewhere along the lines of $5 billion, because at the end of September, according to the Minister of Finance, we currently at a at a debt to GDP ratio of about 80%. Now, at 80%, you can't get any international financial banks to lend you money. I mean, they're going to be crazy. I'm not even sure if those so-called friendly banks in Latin America may be willing to lend you money at a debt to GDP ratio of 80%. But the concerning part about all of this, in terms of the numbers that he's presenting this time around, is what happens when you compare it to the numbers the last time into the budget presentation for 2019 and 2020. So total revenue on that period, 2019 to 2020, was 47.74 billion, and his total expenditure was 53 billion, and he was expecting to raise a deficit of about 5.2 billion, which isn't too bad. However, the reality was that he raised revenue of 32 billion, and given the collapse in oil prices and COVID-19, what actually transpired was a budget deficit of about $16.8 billion. Now, that $16.8 billion is probably not the final figure because, obviously they will still be doing some level of calculation ongoing, and I suspect it's going to increase probably to the tune of around $18 billion. So, nonetheless, it's a huge deficit that he's going to run at the end of 2020. But what is even of more concern is the fact that the Minister of Finance believes that he can raise revenue to the tune of 41.36 billion when in the last fiscal year all he managed to do was 32.5 billion. Now, he did 32.5 billion at a time when the oil prices and gas prices collapsed on COVID-19. I don't think, based on his numbers, that he expects those prices to recover in the short term. So how can you expect to raise uh, a larger amount of revenue? What is your revenue driving measures that you expect to increase this to raise that extra amount of money? That's extra $7 billion. Now, when you look at it, you're seeing some revenue generating activities. Well, not revenue generating activities, but measures of raising revenue. Now he started off, he sent out the revenue authority. He hopes to bring in $5 billion more. But this is not the first time the Minister of Finance has mentioned the Revenue Authority. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the last time either. So this $5 billion that he's expecting to raise via the Revenue Authority, I don't think it's going to come true. Because I don't think they're going to allow the Revenue Authority to come into being. That is the union, probably even the opposition. So therefore, he's not going to raise that $5 billion that he's expecting via the Revenue Authority. Property tax, no, it's not a surprise for property tax because obviously they did campaign on property tax. The campaign to the point where they said that they're going to bring back property tax. But property tax alone is not going to give you sufficient funds to cover the 8.2 billion or even close to that. So where is the rest of the funds going to come from? I suspect the rest of the funding is going to come from he's going to have to go back into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund for another dip. How much he's going to dip, I don't know. It all depends on how much money he's allowed to borrow on the local market, providing that banks in the local market he's allowed to raise a bond to raise the funds to prevent it from dipping too much into the HSF. I still suspect, I'm not quite sure if banks going to go for a debt to GDP ratio of 80%, but then again, too, this is Trinidad. Politics is big here. So it's interesting that he's running these numbers again. I thought this was an ideal opportunity for this government to make the changes that they need to make early on in their term. The population has sufficient time to forgive and to forget because they always say that we have a 7 day mentality. If you were to make the tough decisions now that needed to be made, I think you see it's like a double-edged sword. You make the tough decision now, but the tough decision may very well impact a broader section of the people harshly. So I understand the tightrope he's walking, but at the end of the day, to recover from this, there's only one thing that needs to be done, and we need to curtail. And I'm not going to say curtail spending. I'm going to say curtail unnecessary spending. But that is the plan, because he is intended on running a month-to-month economy. I'll explain the month-to-month economy, what I mean by that in a while. So, what else is the Minister of Finance mentioned in the budget that is interesting to me? TNTech, WASA, and Port. What did he say about TNTech, WASA, and Port? He's going to reduce the subvention the government pays to those entities. So, what's going to happen? TNTech and WASA, they're going to be forced to increase their rates. Now, I don't think the majority of Trinidadians have a problem with TNTech and WASA increasing their rates. It has been a long time since they've gotten a last rate increase. But having said that, that should not be the reason why they're given a rate increase. Rate increase cost comes with service. Nobody's going to argue and say that our WASA has been providing a pretty good service to you. They've been providing an awful service. Do they need a rate increase? Given the level of service that they have been gotten, that they've been providing, we'll see. But TNTech, I don't have a problem with TNTech. I think they should look more internally to cut costs before they go out. But we'll see what happens with TNTech. But the Port Authority, that's where I'm concerned with. They're intending to look for a private manager or private management company to manage the port, not the inter-island ferry, but the operations of the port. I hope the rumors that we're hearing in Port of Spain are not true, to the sense that they're going to give the port operations to the Chinese. I hope that's not true. That is going to create bigger problems because there's a whole list of problems comes when you give the Chinese or China the I shouldn't be saying Chinese. I should be saying China the the um the way to manage a port. They have a way of running ports that is not in the best interest of democracies. Things tend to come in a lot easier, and what's worse than that is that you get you get eyes being on your economy that you don't really want. So the US tends to pay a different eye on your economy when they see things being operated by China. Obviously, China is a communist party, so democracies tend to look differently on anything that China does. What else did the Minister of Finance mention? He mentioned that how I don't know why is this something so big. He's saying that he paid 460 companies $3 billion in bonds. Isn't that the duty of the government to pay companies back their VAT? I don't understand why would you even boast about something like that. There's talk about, well, he did mention how he's going to freeze public sector hiring. That's not going to go down well with the public sector. I'm pretty sure about that. And they're going to increase the retirement age, or they're thinking, sorry, about increasing the retirement age to 65. That gives me a sign that the National Insurance Board is in serious problems. And I don't think that how kicking the bucket down the road, a retirement age 65 is going to be sufficient to solve the problems of the National Insurance Board. But I suspect when the actuaries did your evaluations on NIB, they recognize that the NIB cannot continue to do payouts like this without having a necessary or a respectable rate increase. What is interesting as well is that they went back down the road of saying that they're going to revise or revisit the aluminum industry. I thought that was settled in terms of the minds of the population of Trinidad and Tobago and probably even the government, that how the population is not willing to accept smelting or the aluminum industry in Trinidad. I wait to see if Dr. Wayne Kobal Singh will beat his fast and probably get to 150 days of no water and no food. It's interesting. Crazy how the media allow these people to do such insane things like a fast beyond 40 days and we just make them like some sort of heroes, but I digress. What I like about the budget is that the ability to buy or put aside $50 million to buy computers or electronic devices for kids. What I don't think I like about it is that they're going to give it to needy kids. Who gets to determine who's needy? So if you're only able to afford 30,000 devices and 70,000 kids need devices, who gets to pick the first 30,000? And okay, if you do pick the first 30,000, what happens to the rest? They have no devices, are they not going to be able to learn? So what makes the first 30,000 better than the next? You should just buy devices for everyone and just be done with it. Finding money I don't think it's going to be that much, but another good thing is that they put the income tax or the increased income tax to 84,000, which is going to create more disposable income in some people's pocket. But the problem is, given COVID-19 and the state of the economy and the level of unemployment, how much people truly going to benefit from that? I don't suspect it's going to be a lot. Another thing that I don't agree with is this luxury goods thing, whereby we call it apple and grapes and strawberries luxury. I really thought that was a some sort of ancient thing that we've gone past and we're not going down that road again. But it seems as though we're back again. We're back at it again with that regard. So, as I mentioned in some previous episode, he needs to find a way to reduce foreign currency demand. He's decided to tackle the car industry. Now, that is a major use of foreign currency, but I don't think it's the only one you could have gone down the road with. Because by raising the price of cars or forcing the price of cars to raise, basically what you're saying is that you don't want people to buy vehicles. And the Minister of Finance did mention that there are too many cars on the road. But that is not the solution. The solution is not raising the prices. It's the solution. Government responsibility is to build new roads. Build new roads and increase the public transportation and make it more effective so that people won't use their cars as much as they do. But increasing the price of vehicles and removing the concessions to foreign use vehicle and the quotas and the age of the vehicle is a knee-jerk reaction in my mind. I'm not quite sure what I mean by that. Something that I like and I found, but I say I like in terms of the fuel being placed on the market, but I said with a caveat as well, in the sense that I was hoping that how the pariah fuel would not be allowed to be the only person importing fuels. I thought that would have made more companies come on board, which would have created competition for pariah and forced all the companies that they would have been allowed to import fuel to find cheaper fuel. That would mean that how gas stations don't have to go line up behind pariah to find fuel. They can find fuel from other sources as well. Just like how they do in Guyana, where they have Shell and they have all these different companies bringing in fuel, and therefore not just in Guyana, I think they did it in the US, but I think they did it in Guyana. I'm not 100% sure about Guyana, but they did it in the US. So multiple people bringing in fuel, and therefore that would force the gas stations and the suppliers as well to become more competitive and bring cheaper prices. But I want to go back to the overall thing that I said with regards to how the Minister of Finance is going to run the economy via a month-to-month economy. And yes, I know I'm going on too long, and I don't expect that these, or I don't want these memos to be too long, but lastly, I will talk about the month-to-month economy. He knows fully well he's not going to be able to raise 41.36 billion, and he knows fully well that the budget deficit is going to be in excess of 8.2 billion. What he's going to try and do, what the Minister of Finance has basically done, is to put together a bunch of numbers, throw that out for the initial comment. At the end of every month, based on how much revenue he has raised, he is going to he's going to spend that amount. If there is some project that they need to finance that they see is going to suit their interest, then he's going to call for borrowings or dipping in the Heritage and Civilization Fund. But he knows fully well he's not going to raise $41.36 billion, saving up for some miracle increase in oil and gas prices. But it's a month-to-month economy. Every month, that's what he's going to do. And he's going to try and squeeze the spending as much as he can to keep that deficit down. That deficit is only going to increase. That budget deficit, sorry, is only going to increase unless he has to do, sorry, when I mean he, the government has to do something in their interest. That's when it's going to increase. Other than that, um, normal expenditure, that's going to be gone. So, thanks for listening, guys, and stay tuned.